Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Crossing the Line, and we're going to have a look at some of these politicians that just don't have any shame. They have no regrets over what they did to us over the last couple of years. And today we're going to start off with the New Zealand Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins. Now, he is a smarmy little bloke who is basically cut from the same cloth as his predecessor, that horse-faced Jacinda Ardern, who everyone just seems to love so much. But he doesn't fall far from the tree as it goes with his totalitarian dictatorship that he wants to run in New Zealand. We'll have a look at this story here from the Daily Mail, and then we'll go onto Twitter or X, and we'll have a look at a story that it all just popped up, and I noticed it today, and I just want to have a bit of a rant about it, because I don't know about you, but all these people that claim to have never forced or mandated anything on us or forced people to get any certain experimental drugs pumped into their system. People who just ignore that and pretend that it never happened and that it was all on our own accord and we decided to do what we wanted to do, and they had no coercion, nothing like that, none of the sort. So it just kind of ticks me off after all this is seeming to rear its ugly head again, and we seem to start to looking at going into lockdowns and mask mandates that are coming back around the world, and just kind of pisses me off a bit. I don't know about you, but I want to have a bit of a rant about it anyway. And we'll start the story here with the Daily Mail story. New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins claims no one was forced to take the COVID vaccines, despite being in mandates when he was minister. New Zealand Prime Minister said COVID jab is not compulsory and says people made their own choices. New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins said he has sparked outrage after claiming no one was forced to get the vaccine despite widespread mandates in his country. Speaking to the press conference on Sunday, Mr. Hipkins said that it was about an election promise by New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters to compensate New Zealanders injured by the vaccine or forced out of employment because of mandates. There is a process of people who are injured in a medical procedure. There's already processes in place for dealing with that, Mr. Hipkins said. In terms of the vaccine mandates, I acknowledge that it was a challenging time for people when they ultimately made their own choices. There was no compulsory vaccination. People made their own choices. How do people like that sleep at night? If they were forcing you out of a job, you weren't allowed to go and see your loved ones, you weren't allowed to go to a wedding, you weren't allowed to go to a funeral, you weren't allowed to go to the hospital if your wife was giving birth, you weren't allowed to go to the hospital to see a dying person. You weren't allowed to do anything. They took away your freedoms, and in a country like New Zealand and Australia here, where we herald ourselves as this massive free country and we're so much better than places like the US because they have a constitution and look, they shoot each other all the time, but we're over here just locking each other up for saying things we don't agree with. Mind you, the US, they seem to be doing that as well, but we're nowhere near as bad as somewhere like China or even the UK. Scotland is pretty bloody ordinary at the moment. New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins sparked outrage after claiming no one was forced to get the COVID vaccine despite widespread mandates in his country. Speaking in a press conference, Mr. Hipkins was asked about his election promise, New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters, to compensate New Zealanders. Compensating New Zealanders? How are you going to be compensated for losing time with your family, not being able to see loved ones, sometimes for years? I know I was kept away from family for at least 12 months before we could see each other. My wife was kept away from their family for 2 years. My work colleague, was kept away from his family for nearly 3 years because of the mandates and just the time where it would take for him to get down and see them, because it's such a long way here in Australia. We have quite a large country, and it's rather hard to go and see relatives in other states where the state of our roads and the state of our country at the best of times. But with mandates locking down, no one knew what was going on. If you got to cross 3 or 4 states, there's no way in hell you were going to know whether you were allowed to go into the state, get out of the state, see the family, or whatever you're going to do. So he had to go and get the jab, just so he could go and see his family, which turned out to be a waste of time anyway, because they said that if you go and get the jab, you're allowed to go and cross borders and that, which turned out to be bullshit. And they kept everyone locked down anyway, and you had to go and get special authorization from police and the government to be able to go and do your daily, normal, everyday tasks here in Australia. But people seem to have forgotten that, and they pretend that it was our choice to do those things. But it wasn't. And I don't see how in New Zealand or even here in Australia or wherever, if they're going to compensate people for the time and the suffering and shit like that, how are they going to compensate you? I mean, what is it to you? How much money is it going to take for you to feel better if you missed out? Like I missed out on going and seeing my grandfather before he passed, and I missed out on going to his funeral, and his funeral was quite a sad, lonely affair apparently. And how much money is that going to, how much money does it take to compensate me for that? I'll tell you, it's going to be there's going to be a few zeros there, but it's never going to get back the memories and the feelings and the love lost and all those moments. It's never going to get back any of that. I mean, how many people cancelled their weddings? How many people had to go and pretty much elope and get married in a courthouse, if you're allowed in a courthouse? How many people's lives were ruined and thrown out of whack? How many children have been permanently scarred by forcing them to wear masks? How many children have been scarred by not going to school or being locked down? If you lived in Melbourne, I'm sure they've got some sort of fetish with their minister down there. I have friends who live in Melbourne and they still think he's doing a crack-up job. I don't get it. I think they're starting to fall in love with their prison warden. But I don't get it. What do you suppose, how much money is it going to take for you to have all of these things compensated for? It's impossible to comprehend. I mean, every person's going to be different. There's not enough money. I mean, if you miss your daughter in hospital dying or something tragic and life-altering as that, no money's going to help you. Or if you're permanently injured or even killed by the jab, no money's going to help you. If your child was injured, I mean, how much money would it take to make you feel better? It doesn't work like that. You can't pay people off for the things that you did to them. You think people back in World War II and who were occupied countries by Germany, and we're not going to talk about what they did to the Jewish people. I mean, but do you think that they'd be happy if they were getting paid off? I mean, it's not as severe or, obscene, but do you think they'd take a financial payment? I mean, we'll have a look at this video here of Chris Hipkins just ignoring the fact that he is one of the people that forced the mandates, forced the jabs on people. He was talking about at one point hunting unvaccinated people down and getting them jabbed. And he's sitting there with a wreath around his neck like he's a stand-up happy guy. Just the audacity. I mean, you could see just how weaselly he is by his beady little eyes. Jacinda had her own issues, but this dude's something else.
In terms of the vaccine mandates, I acknowledge that it was a challenging time for people, but they ultimately made their own choices. There was no compulsory vaccination. People made their own choices.
Just call you bullshit, bro. Like, no compulsory vaccination. If you force people to go and get an experimental vaccine, experimental jab, because you're threatening them with not being able to see their kids, not being able to see their family members, not being able to go out and be a contributing member of society, not being able to have a job, if you're threatening with fines, people were getting fined if you're not wearing a mask or not getting the jab and going to work and things like that. And people could have been sent to prison over these things. I don't even know if some people were. They might have been. It's obscene and it's absurd to say that you were not forced to get it. I've talked to a few people that during COVID, during the mandates, and when it came into our industry, and they were deciding whether or not to force them upon us or kick us out of the workforce. Thank God it kind of by the time it got to us, it was pretty much all over Red Rover. But there were still people saying that I shouldn't be allowed to go to work because I'm not jabbed. There's still people saying that You know, you're not getting forced to go and get it, but just go and get it because, you know, you can go to the pub and you can go out shopping and go to work. It's not forcing you to get it if you can't feed your family because you're not allowed to go to work. It's not forcing you. It's your choice. It's your choice to do these things. The comments sparked outrage from Kiwis who lost their jobs and refused travel or couldn't see loved ones in aged or hospital care because they refused to get COVID jabs during the pandemic. Mr. Hipkins said the country's minister at the time of the pandemic was before rising to the role of Prime Minister on January 22nd. Angry comments flooded X on the platform formerly known as Twitter, accusing Mr. Hipkins of gaslighting, which means to manipulate someone into distrusting their perceptions, experience, or understanding of events. Gee, that doesn't sound like anything that's happened in the last 2-3 years. There was a mandatory vaccinations in New Zealand for healthcare workers, military teachers, police officers. One noted, it isn't a choice when you can't continue your uni degree, keep your job, open your business, play your sport, or participate in life without it. Another wrote, and he damned well knew it when we forced the mandates. One account even invited New Zealanders to share the stories around the choices they made around the vaccination mandates and the impact on their lives. Did it feel like a voluntary undertaking to you, the account asked. The majority of responses answered firmly in the negative. My wife and I are teachers. We could not work, one reply read. Even when the mandates ended, I was still asked my vaccine status at interviews, and school board hadn't changed their policy. After 6 months, we moved to the UK where sanity prevails. The UK was pretty bad anyway. I mean, I don't know anywhere that kind of dealt with it. Like, it was dealt with less forcibly in places like China than it was in Melbourne, and places in America. Americans like to spout off about Australia building concentration camps. Well, you know, the Queensland government may have done that, may have, you know, spent a lot of money on Welling Camp or whatever it's called. But in the US, they had lockdowns in, I think it was Portland or Atlanta or somewhere, and they had like curfews. If you went out after a certain amount of time, there was police roaming the streets in vans, shooting pepper balls at people. I mean, we didn't have that here because, I don't know, they might have got a boomerang coming flying back at them, but no country dealt with this sanely. Maybe some of the Nordic countries, maybe some of them. China was welding people into their homes, so it was nearly as bad as Melbourne. Not voluntary, another fumed. Everyday life things were withheld, including access to family members or coercion into complying with their orders. Get jabbed or else. That's exactly how it was. Coercion under duress is not consent. Do you remember when they were blocking off parts of supermarkets? They were non-essential items. Like, you weren't allowed to go and get deodorant, or you weren't allowed to go and get junk food because that's not essential. But they, like, some places, they had everything locked up. I mean, I know the toilet paper fiasco was bad enough. I mean, we ran out of toilet paper. And it was not a fun week. I'll let you... Yeah, it was not fun. But, you know, you get along with it. Anyway, it's absurd to say that we were not forced. How can they gaslight? But it's not just him. It's not just Chris Hipkins. Now, it's the Australian government as well. So here's a little snippet on Twitter or X that I saw. Jimmy Dore. If you don't know who Jimmy Dore is, go and watch his podcast. It's fantastic. He's a very funny man, and he hits the nail on the head here. But he's brought up a video of our one and only Ginger Ninja, Pauline Hanson, sticking it to them, and we'll just have a listen here, shall we?
Jobs were forced to have the vaccination. Now, do you retract your statement that they were not forced?
Senator, no, I believe firmly that nobody was forced to have a vaccine.
So now we know, we've reported this on the show, 70,000 healthcare workers alone. 70,000 healthcare workers alone in New York State lost their jobs. 70,000. And when healthcare workers...
So that's the US. 70,000 in New York State, just in nursing, lost their jobs because they wouldn't get the jab. I know we were with thousands of nurses down here in Australia, and teachers. When teachers were allowed finally to come back to school because they realised, oh shit, we need to teach these kids and we don't have the people to do it. When they were finally allowed back, they were punished by lowering their wage for several weeks. I think it was like 12 weeks or something. They lowered their pay for 12 weeks to punish them because they couldn't punish them any further. They decided, oh, we'll just, I don't know whether it was just a Queensland thing or Australian thing, but they decided we're going to punish these people who stood up to us, and they essentially won. Yes, they were without work and they probably did it really tough, but they got their jobs back. They stuck to their guns. They didn't get this experimental nonsense jammed into their neck. And they came out, they took the high road and they stuck to their morals. And because they couldn't get them anymore, was when they come back to work, they punish them by paying them less. That's insane. That's disgusting. These people who lied to us over the last 3 years need to be held accountable. I don't know whether it's going to... It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I mean, nothing's going to happen about COVID. They're still bringing it back. They're trying to bring it back now. Everyone can see that happening. They're bringing back mandates. People are wearing masks. I'm seeing more and more people wearing masks. It's summer, or it's about to be summer here in Australia, and people are still freaking out about this cold. I mean, if you're worried about it, go and see your doctor, talk to a medical professional, but go and find a good doctor. You know the ones. They're very hard to find, but they do exist somewhere. Go and find them. It's insane to think that they're going to bring this back, and some people are saying, well, they're not going to. People won't put up with it. Fool me once, you can't fool me twice, like George Bush said. How many people do you know? How many people do you see, especially in major cities, that are still walking around wearing masks? Or you see it here on Twitter, just about daily. It's trending that COVID is not over. Bring back the masks. People want the boot on their neck at this point. I don't get what it is. I don't get the fetish they have. There's something wrong with them, but they do want it back. And I guarantee you, the mass amount of sheep that followed the first time and blindly did everything they were told and went and were good little boys and girls and went and got vaccinated and wore their mask and did all their social distancing and all those things that, wasted those few years. They're not going to admit defeat, and they're not going to admit they're wrong. Very few people admit they're wrong. I barely do. If you're having an argument with your partner and halfway through the argument, you figure out that you're in the wrong, how often do you just stop the argument and say, wait. You know what? You're right. I was wrong. I fucked up. Sorry. Never. That barely ever happens. I mean, we're too stubborn. People are just too stubborn. It's not going to happen. These people treated us like vermin, treated us lesser than. They othered us. They put us into literal concentration camps here in Australia. They talked about us like we were scum behind our backs, sometimes to our face, because they didn't realise we weren't vaccinated, which was quite funny. I've had a few conversations like that. But how many of those people are going to come out of the woodwork and say, oh, look, I was wrong. We're not going to do that again. I won't repeat my mistakes. Or are they just going to sign up, wear a mask, put on their feet a bag, and then go and stand out the front of Bunnings, or what you'd have in the US, it would be like a Walmart or something, and go and get vaccinated? Again, they'll go and get their 7th, 8th booster, whatever the fuck it's going to be. I mean, I'd swear to God, if you told some of these people that hanging dog turds around your neck on a collar would protect you from it, they would be wearing it. And they wouldn't just be wearing it. They'd be promoting you to wear it and then calling you a bigot, calling you a racist, a fascist, a baby killer, a grandma killer for not wearing it. These people are insane. What do you do? Like, it's going to happen again, and these people are going to bring it back in, and they're going to pretend that they never, they never did anything like that before, and they will just be the sheep yet again. I'm sure not as many people as last time, but there's still a majority of them. It's a majority of them. We'll keep having a look at what Jimmy here has to say.
Won't take a vaccine. Isn't that like the kitchen help won't eat the food? And 70,000 of them lost their job. Now watch this.
Get the jab or risk losing your job. That's the ultimatum facing hundreds of thousands of essential workers tonight.
I believe everybody was offered an opportunity to get a vaccine or not get a vaccine. I don't believe that anybody was forced to take a vaccine.
Coercion is not consent, but that won't matter for authorised workers if they want to keep their job.
Well, then they won't be going to work.
Nobody was forced to have a vaccine.
If you make the judgment to not get vaccinated and you reckon you can wait out us or the publican or whoever you want to think you're waiting out.
Nobody was forced to have a vaccine.
Life will become very difficult for the unvaccinated from January 31.
Nobody was.
Mark McGowan, Daniel Andrews, Palaszczuk, all of them, whoever they are, they need to be held accountable for this. We can't let this go. They will do it again. These people are still in power. A few of them have been shuffled aside, like Jacinda Ardern, but they're just being replaced by people just as bad, if not worse. If we let those people get away with what they did to us, what they will do is they will repeat it over and over again. Because the amount of people that will just bend over and take it raw is insane. There are more people that would just willingly go and get it done, go and get the jab again, go and do lockdowns because they miss it. Life was simple when you couldn't leave your house. There's massive companies around the world don't want you to leave your home. They want you to stay at home, watch Netflix, get fed the CNN crap and ABC and SBS crap that they fucking force feed you. They don't want you to leave your house. They want you to sit at home. You can get all your food delivered. You can get your porn on demand. You can get fucking Uber Eats. You don't have to go anywhere anymore. You don't have to leave your home. That's what they want, because if you're locked down in your home and you don't even know you're in a prison, why would you leave? If you have everything you ever wanted, why would you leave? If the government gives you some sort of financial aid and handout so you can, or even if they were just giving you food. I'm sure there's millions of people here in this country of 25, 30 million, whatever we're at now. I'm sure there's millions of people that would abide by that, and they would just sit there and they would eat the bugs and they would do what they're told. Because Australia has a massive problem, and it's summed up in a few words. She'll be right, mate. She'll be right, mate is ruining this country. It is locking us down. It is tying our hands. It is feeding us to communism, China. It is feeding us to the Greens communism agenda. It is feeding us to these WEF agendas. It's just feeding people into this machine that is all devouring, and people don't stand up here in Australia because they just shrug it off and go, nah, she'll be right, mate. It's time to uproot them. It's time to throw them out. It's time to get rid of our government that we have now before it's too late. But Australians will not do that because they have the dead ass brain idea that she'll be right will get us through everything. We've lost our country. We lost our country years ago when they took our firearms off of us because of a stupid shooting down in a remote part of the country, and they thought, you know what, we're going to go and get rid of all of the firearms that we can. Not all of them, not every single one, but the majority of them, semi-automatics. Most people, they brought in all the licensing. We are cuckolded by our government. People want the government to take care of them. The welfare state in this country is insane. If they can't figure out how to do something, if they have to pay for something out of pocket, they want the government to take over and do it for them. They want the government to pay for it. They don't think that 50% to 80% of their dollar is going back to taxes or going to companies like Woolworths and Coles that just take our money from us. Like, there's nothing worse than getting robbed by someone and then thanking them for doing it. That's what Australians are doing at this point. It's insane. What do you guys think anyway? Do you think the mandates are coming back? Do you think COVID's coming back? What do you think about Pauline talking to those guys there and Pfizer execs pretending that it was never mandated? What are we going to do? Do you think the people will just bend over again and take it? I'm a bit black-pilled, but yeah, I think they do. I think they will. I think there's a lot of people out there that kind of miss the mandates and the lockdowns and things like that. I mean, There was less traffic on the road. You could sit at home and get paid to do it, and the dole payments were doubled. The pension, people miss it, and I don't know what it is. It's like falling in love with your captor. It's falling in love with the prison warden and asking him to beat you harder. I don't get it. I've never liked being controlled, and I'm not going to take it next time, and like I didn't take it last time. But a lot of people will, because they're too stubborn to admit that they were wrong. What do you guys think anyway? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.